During the summer periods in Australia, the egrets move south. The reason for this is that they look for a suitable nesting site where the temperatures are not extreme. And as they are looking for nesting sites, so they go into breeding plumage. And the eastern cattle egret, apart from the increased breeding feather plumage, develops this beautiful rusty colour going all over the head and face, down the neck, onto the front of the chest. There is also some rusty colour on the back of the bird. Now egrets are characteristically white all over, so having this red coloration makes the cattle egret stand out. It has several other characters too that define it as being a different bird. Firstly, it is short, with a stocky build. The body size is very similar to the little egret, but with the short legs and shorter neck, this stocky little egret is different from the other egrets that have long legs and necks. And the cattle egrets in Australia put on this beautiful show of red plumage in the spring and summer. All egrets are flock birds. You can often see them roosting like this in a tree together. The same when they feed, and in breeding phase they come together in large colonies. The name cattle egret comes from its close association with cattle, and here the birds are all white. There is no rufous coloration, so these birds are not in breeding mode. Now in springtime with these cattle, the egrets are coloured. As the cattle move through grass or pasture, so the insects are disturbed, especially when the cattle chew the grass, exposing the insects, and here the cattle egrets move in. In contrast to other egrets that mostly spend their time wading in water, the cattle egret is far more terrestrial, eating insects, not fish. But its carnivorous appetite extends to other things that move, like amphibia. The binomial name for the cattle egret in Australia is Babolchus coromandus. Babolchus meaning cowherd and coromandus meaning coastline. The coromandus really is an Indian term, which we now often anglicise as coromandel. And indeed, the eastern cattle egret of Australia is the same as the one in India, and its range extends from India down through Southeast Asia into Australia. And as it differs from the bird in the Americas and Europe, it is called the eastern cattle egret. In the mid-1960s, the bird crossed the Tasman Sea and went to New Zealand. Early documentation of the distribution of the cattle egret in Australia reveals that in early colonial times the bird was limited to the northern savanna country. But then with the development of pasture for cattle grazing, these birds moved with the cattle, moving south. And then, as mentioned, they crossed the Tasman, finally going to New Zealand. So the bird can now be found in Australia from the tip of Cape York down to Tasmania. In North Queensland, where the sugar cane is grown and machinery used to harvest the cane, the tractors and harvesters have replaced the cattle. See how the non-breeding white cattle egrets are moving in behind the machinery into the cut cane fields to glean from the new exposed basal cane. Cattle egrets are flock birds, and here you can see a large breeding colony. Some birds have yellow bill and rufous coloration. These are the adult breeders. Other birds are just white with a black bill, or the bill going pale. These are the immature birds. The nests are made of sticks and placed throughout the trees in fairly close proximity, often less than a metre apart. And here with two adults fighting over a stick, you can see there is fierce competition for the appropriate wood. And it's hard to visualise here, but this colony of egrets have made their nests in trees that are on a small island in this lagoon, an ideal place for these birds to nest to reduce attacks by feral animals. So the only real predator here are the raptors. Now I can't tell the difference from a male or a female cattle egret. To me they are isomorphic, but theoretically we're going to get more plumes on the male. It is said that the males are attracted to females with less plumes than they have. Sticks are the main commodity, and this little egret tried to steal one from the nest, but the other bird came in. But generally it is the male bird that brings the sticks to the nest. In this situation, the male bird had just handed a female a stick, and as you can see, she is continuing placement. But there are eggs in this nest, and you can see how she just checks the eggs out and then will sit in a very careful attitude so as not to disturb the embryo too much. Note again the proximity of the nests. This is much closer than what is documented in most other egret colonies. Until the hatchlings are approximately 2 weeks old, the nest is always attended by one of the adults. When the chicks are born, they are white downy chicks. They are not naked, so they are semi-attritial birds, but totally dependent on the adult feeding them. Here in the Hunter Valley with this colony, most of the breeding pairs had 3 chicks. Here now the chicks are old enough for the parents to go and search for food. They grow quickly and, like most chicks, have a voracious appetite, so the parents are constantly flying in and out, bringing them food. Remember that they don't eat fish, so the insects do require time to catch. Here this adult is again looking for sticks to fortify the nest. Sometimes the sticks are taken off the living trees, occasionally with the leaves, and so the trees may eventually die and the colony lose its nesting site. For the leaves also covered in guano, which is toxic to the tree itself. The young birds reach for the adult bill, a term called bill grasping. This stimulates regurgitation, and these young birds are taking the food not from the bill, but from the floor of the nest, picking up the spilt regurgitated food. The chicks are white with a black bill, and they grow quickly, and the bill grasping becomes more intense, and most of the food is then collected directly from the bill of the adult as it brings the food in. So feeding with the cattle egret is a little bit different than many other birds, for they don't directly drop the food into the chick's gaping mouth. As the chicks get bigger, so they get stronger, and the bill grasping becomes far more intense. And the adults would like to get away from some of the larger chicks that keep pecking at their orange bill. The orange bill of breeding mode seems to be a beacon for the young to find food, when in non-breeding mode it is yellow. So the young birds in essence attack that orange bill, with the adults flying in and out constantly getting food, so they lose weight and come back to the nest, and as the chick gets bigger, it may indeed be bigger than the adult bird itself. So you can see that a tug of war between the bills can become very wearing for the adult. So as the chicks get older, you will find the adults move away onto a branch outside the nest for a little bit of respite from bill grasping. On these clips you will notice, with the proximity of the nests, the variation in size of the chicks. Some are large and some are very small. These 3 here with this adult are in between, halfway to fledgling. And look at the tug of war going on with those bills. The adult puts its wings out to maintain balance as the chicks grasp it. Often the bird can be tousled with the larger chicks. Another feature of the feeding adult is that it will bob its head, stretching the neck, helping food to move up into the gullet so they can get a bolus for regurgitation. Every time I see larger chicks like this being fed, I feel sorry for the adult. It is an exhaustive process just flying in and out, but then coming back with these chicks to feed that are large, and bill grasping is not exactly the easiest way to feed a chick. So you can understand why the adults step back from the nest once the chicks get big, moving far away enough to prevent bill grasping. Here, the escape. Another example of regurgitated feeding with bill grasping. Again here the adult flies to the nest, feeds the young ones, and then quickly gets out of the nest back onto a branch. These birds aren't quite branchlings yet, they are not game to follow the adult out of the nest onto a branch. With the close proximity of the nest, one would think there would be more disputes between the nesting pairs, but this rarely happens. But certainly there is often disputes between the adults and the juveniles in the adjacent nest. Discipline to a juvenile that's bigger than the adult is very difficult. Now, a young egret that is attempting to move from the nest out onto a branch. See how it has trouble with balance? It is uncertain, so it quickly moves back to the stability of the nest. But here, these branchlings have been fed, and they can now follow the adult out onto a branch, but a lot of wing flapping to maintain stability. So the adult moves to a higher branch and then back. There is a little bit of education here, for the adult does want them to move out of the nest. Branchlings, now capable of holding onto a perch. The legs that were very pale grey as a chick have now darkened. The bill is going from black to yellow, and the next thing they need to do is learn to fly. When the adults leave the colony, they fly in a straight line off to a food destination. When a bird without colour is flying around the pond like this, doing a circle, you know that it is learning to fly. Watch as a mature adult cruises by with a slower wing flap. Another branchling with the darker legs. And like typical teenagers, the branchlings will often come to the ground, socialising as a group. Some legs are still pale, and some of them are darker. Some of the bills have gone yellow, and some of the bills still have dark, residual, chick-like colour. Death within a colony of cattle egrets can happen. The biggest problem is adverse weather conditions. Too hot, the eggs won't hatch. Too windy, the nests fall apart. Too much rain and the chicks can drown in the nest. This solitary death that I noticed, if you look above the feathers of the dead bird, you will see a fine line. It is nylon fishing line that is caught around the bird's leg. Finally, within this colony there were other breeders. As you can see here, the white ibis and the little black cormorants. This concludes our video on the eastern cattle egret. We hope you've enjoyed it. Subscription to the channel will give you notification of our next release of Australian Birds in the Wild by Plumes of Oz.